Charlotte, North Carolina, a city where stadium lights blaze brightly, where Cherika Adams, a young and ambitious dancer, believed she would build a stable future alongside football star Ray Carruth. Yet, behind the fame and public smiles, a silent conflict simmered. What she desperately wanted to hold on to was the very thing he was determined to eliminate at all costs. Then, in the dead of night, a chilling detail unfolded. Cherika dialed 911 in her dying moments, gasping as she named Carruth as the mastermind behind the barrage of bullets aimed at her. What drove a seemingly fragile relationship to spiral into a murder plot that shocked the entire nation. The streetlights of Charlotte, North Carolina cast their glow on the wet pavement in November 1999, signaling a tragedy that would rewrite the history of American sports. Cherika Adams, 24, was a promising dancer and model, radiant with a dazzling smile and unshakable confidence on stage. Behind the glaring spotlights, she was a young woman with simple aspirations, stability, love, and a warm home. To her friends, Cherika was the epitome of resilience, someone who could shine in a crowd yet remain grounded with a sincere and humble heart. But fate intertwined her life with a man vastly different from her, a chance encounter that sparked both hope and tragedy. Ray Lamar Carruth, 25, was a rising star for the Carolina Panthers, selected in the first round of the 1997 NFL Draft, standing at 6'1" with a muscular build and rare speed. Carruth was hailed as a new icon of American football. His soaring career brought not only million-dollar contracts but also fame, women, and a lavish lifestyle many could only dream of. In 1998, at an upscale Charlotte nightclub, Cherika and Carruth met during a Panthers team party. Amid pulsating music, clinking glasses, and dim lights, their encounter seemed like the start of a fairy tale, a beautiful young woman and a successful athlete. But few could have foreseen that beneath this perfect facade lay stark differences in values, desires, and responsibilities, factors that would transform a fleeting romance into a chain of events leading to tragedy. The early months of 1999 marked a turning point in the relationship between Cherika Adams and Ray Carruth. What began as a chance meeting at a nightclub quickly blossomed into a passionate romance. But it was also the moment when deep-seated conflicts began to surface. Behind the glamour of an NFL star, Ray Carruth led a life riddled with contradictions and secrets. Unlike the polished image of a professional athlete adored by the public, his personal life was a tangled mess. Carruth juggled multiple romantic relationships simultaneously, each woman believing she was the sole object of his affection. Michelle Wright, a woman from California, had a son with Carruth in 1998. Though never married, she still hoped for a future with him. Amber Turner, a local model in Charlotte, was also dating Carruth. And then there was Cherika Adams, who gradually became the center of an escalating emotional storm. Carruth had a remarkable talent for concealing the truth. He skillfully managed his time, using excuses about training schedules and games to explain his absences to each woman. He showed genuine care, showering them with expensive gifts and promises of a bright future. But beneath this charming mask was a man terrified of commitment and responsibility. One afternoon in June 1999, Cherika Adams called Carruth with news she believed would change their lives forever. She was pregnant. While Cherika couldn't hide her joy and excitement, Carruth's response was the complete opposite. The prolonged silence on the other end of the line filled her with unease. "I thought you'd be happy," Cherika whispered, her voice trembling as she sensed his coldness. "We need to talk," he replied mechanically, his voice devoid of emotion. Their next meeting took place at a quiet Charlotte restaurant. Carruth sat across from Cherika, his gaze cold and distant. He made no effort to hide his displeasure about the news. To Carruth, the unborn child was not a gift from heaven, but a direct threat to everything he had built. "I'm not ready to have a kid," Carruth said bluntly. "And I don't think you're ready either. We should consider other options." Cherika immediately understood what he meant. She shook her head firmly, placing a hand on her still flat stomach. "I'm not getting rid of this baby. This is our child. Ray, I'll raise it somehow." In the weeks that followed, Carruth relentlessly pressured Cherika. He employed every tactic, From sweet-talking promises to subtle threats, at times, he vowed to support her and the child if she chose to keep it. Other times, he painted a grim picture of the financial struggles a single mother would face. "Do you know how much it costs to raise a kid?" Carruth asked during a late-night phone call. "With your job, how are you going to work and take care of a child?" Cherica felt increasingly isolated. Her close friends began to notice the shift in Carruth's behavior. Michelle, a friend from high school, recalled Cherica often talked about her arguments with Ray. She said he kept pushing her to get an abortion, even offering to pay for it. Carruth went so far as to make financial offers to persuade Cherica. He promised $5,000 if she agreed to terminate the pregnancy, a significant sum for a young dancer. But Cherica stood firm, believing she could change his mind once the baby was born. When he realized Cherica couldn't be swayed, Carruth's demeanor grew increasingly hostile. He began avoiding her, ignoring her calls, and refusing to meet when forced to interact. He displayed coldness and even animosity. Carruth's concerns weren't solely about financial responsibility. He feared the impact on his public image. In that era, an NFL player fathering children out of wedlock with multiple women could face severe consequences from the team and sponsors. Moreover, Carruth was already paying child support for his son with Michelle Wright. Adding another child meant doubling his financial burden, an unacceptable prospect for someone who prioritized personal gain above all else. By September 1999, when Cherica's pregnancy reached 6 months, Carruth's behavior showed alarming changes. He began acting erratically, frequently inquiring about her daily schedule, where she went and whom she met. Van Brett Watkins, a childhood friend of Carruth's, later testified that Carruth started discussing extreme solutions. Initially, these conversations seemed like drunken rants, but they grew increasingly specific and detailed. Ray said he wanted this problem to go away. Watkins told police, "At first, I thought he was just joking, but then he started talking about money, about hiring someone." Carruth also contacted Stanley Abraham, another acquaintance, to discuss handling the situation. These conversations were conducted discreetly, often over the phone or in secluded locations. By November 1999, as Cherica neared her due date, Carruth had shifted from persuasion to planning elimination. He no longer saw Cherica as the woman he once loved, but as a threat to be eradicated. At a meeting at Watkins's home, Carruth made a concrete offer, $3,000 to deal with the Cherica-Adams problem once and for all. Watkins, a man with a criminal record and financial troubles, agreed. Carruth devised a meticulous plan. He studied Cherica's schedule, knowing exactly where she went and when. He even suggested the method of staged robbery on her way home. "It has to look like a robbery," Carruth instructed. "Take her purse, her jewelry, so no one suspects anything." In late November, with everything carefully arranged, Carruth called Cherica and invited her to a movie. This was not a gesture of reconciliation or lingering affection, but the first step in a meticulously calculated murder plot. Cherica, still hopeful about repairing their relationship for the sake of their unborn child, agreed. She could never have imagined that the evening of November 15th in 1999 would be her last. The night of November 15th, 1999 began like any other in Charlotte, North Carolina. A cold autumn breeze swept through the quiet streets, while streetlights cast hazy glows on the wet pavement. Cherica Adams, 8 months pregnant, felt a mix of excitement and nervousness when Ray Carruth called to invite her to a movie. It was the first time in weeks he had reached out, giving her hope that he might be softening toward their unborn child. She carefully chose a light blue dress that concealed her baby bump, applied light makeup, and carried a small purse containing her mobile phone, a still relatively novel device at the time. As she glanced at herself in the mirror one last time before leaving, Cherica had no idea it would be her final moment in her familiar room. The movie outing took place at Concord Mills, a popular entertainment spot in Charlotte. Carruth and Cherica met in the parking lot, he driving a sleek black BMW, she in her old Honda Civic. Throughout the screening, Carruth acted normal, even asking about her health and the baby with apparent concern. Cherica felt relieved, believing their relationship tensions might be easing. When the movie ended around midnight, Carruth suggested they drive home separately instead of together as usual. "I have to stop by a friend's place," he explained casually. You go ahead. I'll call you later. Sharika nodded, unsuspecting of the true intent behind his suggestion. Caruth drove out of the parking lot first, with Sharika following a short distance behind. The headlights of her Honda illuminated the license plate of his BMW, creating a false sense of security. They traveled through Charlotte's familiar streets, heading from the theater toward the residential area where Sharika lived, on Rhea Road, a relatively deserted stretch at that hour. Caruth suddenly slowed down and pulled over to the side. Sharika, driving behind, had to stop, confused about what was happening. She lowered her window and leaned out, intending to ask if something was wrong with his car. At that moment, a dark-colored Toyota Camry sped up from behind. Van Brett Watkins, seated in the passenger seat, held a loaded handgun. Michael Eugene Kennedy, the driver, had precisely positioned the car alongside the Honda as planned. Watkins leaned out the window, aiming the gun at Sharika. The silence of the night was shattered by gunfire as 5 shots rang out in rapid succession, piercing the Honda's window and body. Several bullets struck Sharika in the back and hip. The shock of the impact forced her to slump over the driver's seat, blood soaking her light blue dress. As the gunfire erupted, Caruth floored the gas pedal and sped off into the darkness. The Toyota Camry also fled the scene, leaving Sharika alone in her blood-soaked car, racked with pain and fear. Despite her severe injuries, Sharika remained conscious, with trembling hands. She grabbed her mobile phone and dialed 911. The call was made at 12:30 a.m. on November 16th in 1999. I've been shot, Sharika whispered. I'm pregnant. Ray shot me. Ray Caruth. She described to the dispatcher how Caruth had been driving ahead and fled as soon as the shots rang out. Paramedics and police arrived within 8 minutes, finding Sharika in critical condition. The wail of ambulance sirens pierced the Charlotte night as Sharika Adams was rushed to the emergency room at Carolinas Medical Center. Doctors quickly assessed her condition. Bullet wounds to her back and hip had caused severe blood loss. But the most urgent concern was the survival of the baby she carried. Dr. James Miller, the chief obstetrician, made the critical decision to perform an emergency C-section to save the child. The medical team knew they had only 10-15 minutes before the baby's brain could suffer irreversible damage from oxygen deprivation. The surgery unfolded under intense pressure, with every second potentially determining a life. Chancellor Lee Adams was born in the early hours of November 16th of 1999, weighing 1.8 kg and delivered 10 weeks premature. Though his heart was still beating, his condition was critical. Doctors discovered he had suffered prolonged oxygen deprivation, which could lead to permanent brain damage. Chancellor was rushed to the neonatal intensive care unit, while Sharika fought for her life in intensive care, as the battle for survival unfolded in the hospital. Charlotte police launched their investigation based on Sharika's crucial 911 call. Detective Charles Henson, assigned to the case, immediately recognized the significance of the victim's statement. Sharika had named Ray Caruth in her emergency call, providing direct and valuable evidence. Police quickly identified Caruth and began exploring his relationship with the victim. The crime scene on Rhea Road was cordoned off and meticulously examined. Forensic experts recovered 5 .38 caliber shell casings, along with glass fragments and blood traces. Sharika's Honda Civic was towed to the lab for detailed analysis. The angle of the bullet holes indicated the shooter had fired from another vehicle moving parallel to hers. Detective Henson and his team promptly visited Caruth's home in Myers Park, an upscale Charlotte neighborhood. They found the house empty. Neighbors reported seeing Caruth drive away late that night, and he had not returned. A nationwide manhunt was launched immediately. The FBI joined the case, suspecting Caruth had fled North Carolina. His image was broadcast across national media, making the case one of the most closely followed stories in the country. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Sharika briefly regained consciousness and provided further details to police. She described how Caruth had abruptly stopped his car and how another vehicle appeared from behind to carry out the attack. Her testimony strengthened the police's belief that this was a premeditated crime. Investigators began delving into the complex relationship between Caruth and Sharika. They uncovered their disputes over the pregnancy and the pressure Caruth had exerted on her to abort. Cherika's friends confirmed she had expressed concerns about his increasingly hostile behavior. The investigation expanded to Carruth's connections with potential accomplices. Van Brett Watkins, a close friend, quickly became a person of interest. His criminal history and financial ties to Carruth made him a prime suspect. On December 14, 1999, after nearly a month of fighting courageously, Yerika Adams succumbed to complications from her injuries. Her death elevated the case from attempted assault to murder, intensifying pressure on investigators to find and apprehend Carruth. The day after Cherika's death, on December 15, 1999, Carruth was finally arrested in Tennessee under unusual circumstances. He was found hiding in the trunk of a friend's car, along with $3,900 in cash, a bottle of water, and energy bars. His attempt to flee further solidified police suspicions of his guilt. Carruth's arrest marked the beginning of a new phase in the investigation, as law enforcement started building the case against him and his accomplices. The Cherika Adams case was not only a heartbreaking personal tragedy, but also exposed serious flaws in the social and legal systems of late 1990s America. These failures not only facilitated the tragedy, but also reflected deeper issues in how society protects vulnerable individuals, particularly pregnant women in abusive relationships. One of the most significant failures was the lack of awareness and timely intervention regarding warning signs of domestic violence. Although Cherika's friends and family noticed clear tensions in her relationship with Ray Carruth, no one could predict the true danger she faced. This stemmed largely from the absence of community education programs on identifying and responding to domestic violence. In the months leading up to the crime, Cherika had shared with friends the pressure Carruth placed on her to abort. She described heated arguments, subtle threats, and his increasingly hostile demeanor. Yet, these signs were often dismissed as typical relationship struggles rather than precursors to a serious crime. This lack of understanding was not just individual, but also societal, with insufficient resources and training to help people recognize patterns of controlling and violent behavior. Nonprofit organizations addressing domestic violence at the time focused primarily on supporting victims after violence occurred, rather than preventing it through early detection education. The legal system also showed significant limitations in protecting potential victims. Despite Cherika sharing her concerns about Carruth's threats and pressure, no formal protective measures were implemented. The law at the time lacked robust provisions for restraining orders in cases of psychological harassment or threats without clear physical violence. Moreover, the absence of an integrated database to track patterns of dangerous behavior meant law enforcement couldn't detect the escalating threat. A system to record and monitor reports of threats, harassment, or domestic violence might have identified Carruth's dangerous behavior earlier. Socioeconomic factors also played a critical role in creating protective gaps. Carruth's wealth and fame as an NFL star created an invisible shield around him. Many, including those who could have intervened, tended to downplay accusations against prominent and successful figures. This halo effect caused Cherika's and her friends' warnings to be taken less seriously. The power imbalance between a millionaire athlete and a young dancer also created barriers to seeking help. Cherika may have feared she wouldn't be believed or supported when confronting someone with significant community influence. This reflects a broader issue in how the justice system handles cases involving high-status individuals. The case also highlighted deficiencies in managing and overseeing professional athletes. The NFL and its teams at the time lacked comprehensive programs for ethics education and personal behavior management for players. The pressures of fame, wealth, and public expectations may have fostered an environment where Carruth felt he could evade consequences for his actions. The absence of psychological support and counseling for young athletes facing professional and personal pressures was another contributing factor. As a young man thrust into sudden wealth and fame, Carruth likely lacked the skills to responsibly navigate complex personal situations. The sports media also played a role by overly idealizing athletes, making it hard for the public to believe they could commit heinous acts. The worship of sports stars created a gap between their public image and private reality, complicating the recognition and reporting of problematic behavior. From a law enforcement perspective, the case exposed limitations in coordination between agencies. The delay in apprehending Carruth after his flight reflected shortcomings in information sharing and coordination between local, state, and federal police. A more effective alert and tracking system might have prevented his prolonged evasion. These failures also reflected a broader cultural issue regarding attitudes toward women's reproductive rights and autonomy. Carruth's view of Cherika's decision to keep her child as a threat to be eliminated revealed a disregard for women's choices. Society at the time lacked sufficient mechanisms to protect women from pressure and violence related to reproductive decisions. Ultimately, the Cherika Adams case is a painful reminder of the tragic consequences when societal protections fail. It demands a comprehensive reevaluation of how society identifies, responds to, and prevents domestic violence, particularly in contexts of power imbalances and social influence. The trial of Ray Carruth began in January 2001 in Charlotte. Drawing significant public and media attention, Carruth faced charges of conspiracy to commit murder, using a weapon to destroy a fetus, and related offenses. Prosecutor David Strickland built a strong case, leveraging Adams's 911 call, accomplice testimonies, and evidence of financial motives to prove Carruth orchestrated the murder to avoid child support responsibilities. Carruth's defense attorneys argued he wasn't directly involved in the shooting and was a victim of a revenge plot by Watkins. However, evidence of Carruth paying accomplices and staging the attack undermined this defense after days of deliberation. The jury reached a verdict on January 19, 2001. Carruth was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and using a weapon to destroy a fetus, but was acquitted of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 18 to 24 years in prison. Carruth was released on October 22, 2018, after serving nearly 19 years. Meanwhile, Chancellor Adams, Cherika's son, survived but faces lifelong cerebral palsy due to oxygen deprivation during the attack. Raised by his grandmother, she tirelessly fought for justice for her daughter. The Cherika Adams case left a heartbreaking legacy, becoming a symbol of the dangers of domestic violence and the selfishness of those who prioritize personal gain over human lives. It sparked critical discussions about the responsibilities of sports stars, justice system reforms, and the need for better protections for domestic violence victims. Cherika Adams's story is a tragic reminder that justice, though served,